Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's TriStar webinar. We're going to introduce KeyShot, is the fastest and easiest 3D rendering and animation software on the market today, I think. My name is Shawn Schreckengost. I'm a TriStar Business Development Manager, and I'm just going to spend about 45 minutes with you here today, and then we'll open up for some questions. We're going to do a quick overview of KeyShot. We're not going to get into any advanced capabilities. We just want to show you how easy this is to use right out of the box, do a couple of animations, or excuse me, renderings, and have some fun. So for today's agenda, I just want to introduce TriStar and then introduce KeyShot, some of the capabilities with some slides, and then we'll do a live demonstration with a walkthrough of the standard KeyShot interface, how to import products, how to apply materials, configure the environment, apply some lighting, set some camera settings, and output a rendering. And then I'll have some additional resources for you at the end, some links to some tools on the internet. So a little bit about TriStar. We're headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona, with operations across North America, US, Canada, and Mexico. We're PTC's largest value-added partner with an emphasis on PTC solutions. We have executed over 500 successful windshield migrations and implementations, and we have over 5,000 direct customers in North America. Here's just a handful of some of the customers that we service. Some of the things we do, full PLM implementation and system connectivity, full migrations, ITAR compliant migrations. We have, products including windshield extensions and applications. So with KeyShot, this is a great tool in my opinion. It's very easy to use. It's a standalone real-time ray tracing global illumination program to create 3D renderings, animations, and visuals. It's 100% CPU based, although with KeyShot 9, we now have a GPU mode available. But what's nice about the CPU based rendering is that it doesn't require a very expensive graphics card. It's going to be using your CPU, and then you can set it to use however many cores on or processors on your CPU. It's CAD neutral. You can import over 30 different file types. It's primarily a drag and drop workflow, so it's very easy to use, and the interface is set up kind of in a workflow method, so you kind of got to work from left to right through the menus to create your renderings. It's real-time ray tracing, which allows you to see your changes in real time. So what that means is once you start creating a rendering, it's going to do that in real time. It's going to continuously update. When you make a change, it's going to start again in real time, and we can actually see that happening if we choose. And then we can create high quality renderings in pretty quick time. So very neat little tool. How KeyShot is used today: early concept presentation, design, material, and color evaluation, final design presentations, technical publications and manuals, sales and marketing images and web content, client presentations of a product, as if it was built. These things really look real, and you can set them, these renderings, in a backdrop image that just, you can't really tell it's a rendering. And then we can create sales and marketing images directly from a 3D CAD model. One neat thing they've added in recent versions is this cutaway tool, so we can just bring in another solid block into our product project and use that to cut away the model. So it could be just a slice or a kind of a quarter cutout if you want, and we'll do one of those in the demonstration. We have displacement mapping, so now we can create a bump mapping or even displacement, where if we have like fur on an object, like a tennis ball, for example, we can do things like that. We can also create technical illustrations using the tune shader to do things that you might want to put in a technical manual. We also have a free viewer. So there's a standalone application that allows you to share KeyShot scenes with other users. And then there's also a KeyShot plugin for Creo, and this allows you to interact directly with your Creo models in a native application. Okay, so although Creo today has KeyShot kind of embedded as its rendering tool, you can still use the Creo plugin, which allows you access to the full capabilities of KeyShot. So with that, as I mentioned, I'll keep that short. We'll go straight into a live demonstration. And I've already launched KeyShot, KeyShot 9, and this is what you'll see when you first launch the tool. And so it's a typical Microsoft similar application, ribbon type interface with drop-down menus and so on. So very familiar for those of you who use Microsoft products. There's a welcome screen that pops up when you first launch the tool, and this kind of gives you direct access to some demo scenes or recent projects, some tips and tricks, and the ability to import a product right here, or opening an existing. Okay. Now, one of the things I want to point out is there's some great help tools available. There's a manual that you can access online here, and you just kind of can navigate through the manual to find things that you might be looking for. There's also a learning tools. There's some tutorials and webinars and quick tips. There's also a hotkeys tool that you can open and see, one key type menu options. For example, the K key brings up those key hotkeys, right? The W brings up the welcome screen, right? If I want to bring up some menus, for example, my materials menu or my scene menu. So these are just different hotkeys that are available within the tool. Okay, so before I get too much more into the menu and the workflow, let's go ahead and import a product. I have two renderings that I'm going to create for you today. The first one I'm going to create is a tube of lipstick. This is a model that I created for a customer of mine in Creo, and I'm just opening directly the native Creo file here. It's an assembly, so it'll go ahead and pull in the assembly and all the parts associated with that. Okay, and when I import a product, I have choices to modify that during import. I want to maybe modify the scene or modify the position. And this is one that's important because in some cases, your CAD product might have the X, Y, and Z axis in a different orientation than you might anticipate. So you can always change which axis is going to point up when we get it into KeyShot. Okay, in this case, I'm just going to leave the defaults alone and go ahead and import that product. Okay, and this product has a couple parts. What I want to point out is the moment I bring this product into KeyShot as my project, it's starting to create the rendering. The longer I leave this still on the screen and don't do anything to it, it's going to continue to improve that rendering. We can turn on the heads-up display, in my upper left-hand corner, and as you can see, it's continuing to create samples and render this image. Okay, so as long as we don't do anything to this, it's going to continue. The moment we make a change, it's going to start over again. So we'll just turn off that heads-up display. I'm going to activate my library and my scene menus, and these show up on the sides of the display. Now this is something that we can get from the drop down here, the default. If we go to the startup, that's what happens when we launch the tool. But we can also go to the default, which includes those two menus. Okay, now this is set up in a typical workflow from left to right, meaning we typically start by adding our materials, adding colors or textures, and then we apply our environments and backplates. And then we have a favorites menu as well, and then some additional models if we need to use models for temporary use, maybe for creating cutouts or what have you. Okay, as I click on these, you can see I have a colors menu, a texture menu, and so on. On the right-hand side, we have our scene menu for our project, right? And so in this scene, we have basically the model sets and the cameras that we're going to use. Now, you can think of this as a virtual product in a virtual studio environment using a virtual camera. So everything we're doing here is really kind of based on looking through the camera at the product in this virtual environment. Okay, so when I move the scene, I'm actually moving the camera, right? So if I were to rotate this or pan it or zoom in and out, that's what I'm doing, is I'm actually moving that camera. Okay, if I want to actually move the product, we have the ability to do that by right-clicking on the product and using Move. And we're going to do some of this in a moment. Okay, the first thing I like to do is create a new camera view. All right, so I'm just going to right-click on camera, and I'm going to add this camera, and I'm just going to call this camera home. And the reason I do this is so I can always get back to the start. Now, this is just a personal preference of mine, but that allows me to, if I were to take this pre-camera and start to rotate it or move it or whatever, I can always go back to my home view and get back where I started. The free camera does not save saves automatically. So if I move it, it stays that way. It doesn't matter if I click on it again, it's going to go back to the last position that I had this camera. So this is the nice thing about just creating this home. And then we'll go ahead and create some additional cameras to actually create our renderings. Okay, so for now, we'll just leave that alone. I'm going to go back over to the left menu, and I'm going to start applying some materials. Now, this is a lipstick tube. I could put any color on it or any material. I can navigate through my library here. For example, maybe I want to add the gold outside material here. So if I go to my precious materials and click on gold, maybe I want to add a 24 karat gold polished material to this product. Now, this is just drag and drop. So once I've found the material that I want to use, I can just drag and drop that onto the product. Okay, so very simple, right? If I do that again, I'm going to drag and drop that onto the bottom. It's going to come back and ask me, well, do I want to link these two? And what that means is, do I want to use the material once, and if I make a change to one, it changes the other? Or do I want to have them separate? Because we do have the ability to modify the materials in our scene, right? And we're going to do that in a moment. But in this case, since it's part of the outer shell of this lipstick tube, we're going to go ahead and link those together. Now, we can unlink them later if we want, or relink them if we so choose. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and search now. Maybe I want to add something that's chrome. I can actually search through the materials, and I can find something that is matches my search keyword here. And I'm going to put chrome on this little piece right here. Now, materials in KeyShot are basically just colors and textures, right? So we can apply colors or textures independently, or we can just use the materials. So don't get caught up on the name of being chrome. It's really the color and the texture that's applied to that material titled chrome, okay? Now, one of the things we can do is we can drag and drop the materials directly into our scene. So as you can see, we've got all the components that make up this product, right? We have the base of the tube, we have the inset, we have the mechanism on the inside. And as you can see on my screen, it's kind of highlighting as I select from this menu what those things are, right? So for example, if I wanted to change the color of the inset for this lipstick, maybe I want to use a brick color. So I found this color that I really like. It's called Brick House, and I'm going to just drag and drop that onto my scene here. Even though I can't see into the product, I'm just going to add that to that color insert, right? And if I were to hide that cap, all right, we should be able to see that that inset now has the color assigned to that. You know, before I did that, it was gray. Okay, we also want to add that chrome color to a chrome material to the mechanism in here. And again, it wants to know if I want to link that. And then as far as the parts inside the cap, I think I want to add a clear piece of plastic for that. So if I just type in some keyword here, it's going to take me to all the materials that have that keyword in it. And I want to use this clear rough plastic. I'm just going to add that to that right there. Okay, we'll go ahead and turn the cap back on so that we can see the product. Now, I don't want to start moving the camera around just yet. I want to go ahead and finish setting up my product to where I want to, you know, take the photograph of it or create the rendering. So in this case, I want to take this cap and I want to move it off of the base here and set it aside. So for that, I'm just going to take this cap, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to move it. And this allows me to either translate, rotate, or scale this part of the product. Now, I really don't want to scale it. I don't want to rotate it just yet. I'm just going to translate it and drag it off. I can pull this in any of these three axes or on any of these three planes. And I'm just going to kind of pull it off of my product here. And then I'm going to rotate it. And it's easier sometimes if you just turn off the transitions that you don't want to use. And I can drag this freehand, or if I use my shift key for rotation, it's going to rotate it in 15-degree increments. And I'm just going to rotate that around 90 degrees. You can also specify specifically here in the Move tool what you want for your rotation, translation, or scale value. So I can either drag or I can specify explicitly. Now, in the Move dialog, I also have the ability to snap this item that I'm moving to the ground. And that's what we want to do, is we're going to set this cap right on the ground, and then we're going to accept that move. Okay. I'm also going to take and move the color insert, and I'm just going to move that up a little bit to get it out of the tube here. So we'll just translate that, and we'll move it up. And then I'm going to rotate it around so that I can see a little more detail of that. We'll facet on the face there. And we'll accept that. Okay. Now, every so often, you'll see this save reminder pop up. So this kind of gives you an opportunity to save it if you want to. I'm not going to save this right now, so I'll just go ahead and cancel it. Okay. Now, let's take a look at what we have here. We have our materials assigned to this product. We assign some gold material, some chrome material, and then a color for the color of the lipstick. At this point, I want to start adding things to my environment so that I can take this photograph or create this rendering. But notice the reflections in these materials here. I'm actually seeing the cap reflected in the tube here, and then it's reflected again back and forth. So you can see how kind of deep this is, kind of like two mirrors, you know, opposing each other. So that's kind of cool that it's able to do that kind of stuff, right? So at this point, let's go ahead and take a look at the environment. I'm not going to add any colors here because that's all part of my material. I'm not going to add any textures. Again, that's part of my material. I'm going to go to my environment. Now, my environment you can think of as kind of the studio, if you will. Now, we have several types of environments. We have some interiors, some outdoors, some studio types. In this case, it's a tube of lipstick. I'm going to put it in a bathroom, right? So we have some environments for the interior that come with this tool. In this case, I have this bathroom environment. Now, this is not my backdrop. This is just the environment. And what that means is it's kind of a lighting environment. And it gives my project or my product something to reflect in the background. It's also my lighting for this. We're going to make some changes to this when we start adjusting our scene, but I'm just going to add that in there for now so that I have the appropriate environment. Okay. Now I also want to bring in some backdrops. Okay. And I have a library of backdrops that come with this tool, but I really don't have a backdrop that I want to use for this bathroom. So what I did was I took a photograph of one of my bathrooms in my house, and I, you know, downloaded it onto my machine, and I can go ahead and bring it into KeyShot to use for my rendering. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and create a folder to put this in, and I'll just call it demo folder, right? And in that folder, I'm going to import this backdrop, and I'll just go to where those are on my machine. I think they're here, custom images and backplates. And then there's that vanity that I'm going to use. Okay. And now that I have that in here, I'm just going to drag and drop that into my scene as well. Okay. So now I'm looking at the backplate. As you can see, the scaling is a little bit off here. What I don't want to do is I don't want to scale my product. I just want to change the depth or the distance from my camera that I'm looking at this object. So now I'm going to go over here to my scene and start making some changes here. So with this, we have our model sets, we have our camera. I'm going to go ahead and now create a new camera for creating this rendering. So in this case, we'll just call this vanity. And we might take more than one, so I'll say vanity 01, and we'll say okay. So now that that's my camera, I can then go to the camera tool here and edit it. We're going to make some changes to the materials with the next rendering. I don't want to get too involved with this one. I'm just trying to keep it simple for now. But with the camera, I do want to change the distance from the product for this, right? So I'm just going to kind of eyeball that in for size. Okay. And then I'm going to kind of rotate this around a little bit. And then we'll go over here to the pan, and we're going to just kind of move this over and put it on the vanity right next to these lotion bottles. Okay. Looks pretty good for what I want, but one thing you'll notice is that the perspective of this photograph doesn't match the perspective of my product. So once I get it kind of scaled and set where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and use this match perspective for this one camera here. So if we go match perspective, this gives me the ability to use these kind of perspective, vanishing lines, if you will, to line up with existing geometry in my photograph with X, Y, and Z axes, right? So for example, my X axis, I'm going to take and line up with the counter here. So I'm just going to drag and drop that little arrow so that it lines up with that geometry. So I'm lining up with this edge over here, and then we'll do the same thing down with this edge here. And I'm not too worried about the distortion of my image right now. I'm just kind of trying to get this lined up. Once I get everything lined up, my image will look nice and clean here. So we'll just use whatever existing geometry we can get. And this is not snapping, of course, it's just a photograph, so I kind of got to just eyeball it and get it close. And close enough's fine. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just trying to kind of match as best we can what we're seeing on the photograph. And I can always come back, of course, and tweak this a little bit later, but for now. And when I do this last one here, you'll see that this kind of snaps into sitting on that vanity, just nice and neat, like just the way I want it. Okay, looks good. I'm going to go ahead and pan that over just a little bit. And we're going to just change the azimuth here to rotate that around. So that's right about where I want it. So I can go ahead and turn off that match perspective, and it looks pretty good. Now, the next thing you'll notice here is that the shadows for the lipstick don't necessarily match the shadows in my photograph. So that's when we go to the environment and we can modify that environment. So we have the ability to change the brightness of it if we want. We can kind of make it, you know, brighter or more dim. I kind of want to match what's in my photograph, and the contrast as well. We'll kind of match that. And then I want to rotate that environment, and that's what this allows me to do. And you'll see as I rotate this that my shadows will rotate with it. All right, so I'm just going to kind of rotate that over until my shadows are about where I want them to be. Maybe just a little bit more. Oh, perfect. So I like what I see there. And I think I'm in pretty good shape to make a rendering at this point. So as you can see, very, very easy to create realistic looking renderings very quickly. It's all drag and drop, very intuitive interface. These are things that you can do with very little time, hands-on time with the tool. All right. So at this point, I'm ready to make any final adjustments. I have, you know, changes to the lighting. For example, maybe I want use maybe a interior type lighting, which kind of gives me a little bit different appearance of the lighting. Maybe I want to see a reflection in the ground here, so I can turn on some ground reflections. I might want to see, you know, it's kind of hard to see on this image, but there are some reflections on the counter there. And then anything that I want to change to the image itself, maybe I want to modify the bloom of the image or the vignette. I can do that as well, maybe kind of diffuse that a little bit. And again, it's just kind of eyeballing what looks good to you, kind of as if you were a photographer. And that's really what you're doing. You're taking a virtual photograph of a virtual product in a virtual environment. Okay. With that, we'll go up to render, and I'm going to go ahead and create my rendering. We also have this toolbar at the bottom. If I want to create my rendering down here, I can access that as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and use the defaults. We'll give this, vanity 01, and we'll say render. If I want to create multiple renderings, I can create a queue and then have it do it later. But at this point, we'll go ahead and do that rendering. We'll go ahead and render it anyway, even though it's not saved. And let it do its thing. And I didn't set, you know, very high quality with this. I just kind of wanted to do the defaults to see what I get. And then if I want to make some changes, I can, you know, do that and, you know, re-render it. Okay, so that's done. I'll go ahead and close this, and this gets created in a renderings folder under your KeyShot public documents. And let's take a look at that. So this is the rendering that I just created. And we'll just kind of zoom in. You know, looks pretty good. The photo's a little bit out of focus. I didn't do a very high quality, but as you can see, very, very easy to do, very quick. Okay. So with that, then let's go ahead and create another rendering. I got a different product that I want to create here, so we'll just close out of this one. I'm just going to do a file and new. I'm going to discard this project. I don't really want to save it, so since I do it again, I don't want to, you know, save it. So we'll discard that, and I'm going to go ahead and import into this a bottle of beer that I created. So I have this beverage here with no appearances. Now I do want to point out that if you have appearances applied in your Creo models, you can use those as materials here in KeyShot. Now I haven't applied any appearances in Creo to this, so it just is going to come in as the default appearances, right? But what you'll see here is in my materials tab, for each of the parts that I have in this model, I do have a material that's assigned to it that came from Creo. We're going to override that by adding our own materials here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my workflow here and start with my materials. In this case, I want to add a material for the glass. I want to add a material for the beer, and I want to add a material for the bottle cap. Now I could, you know, navigate through the menus here, or if I just type in what I'm looking for and see what my keyword gets for me. So for example, if I type in glass as a keyword, it's searching my entire library for anything that's glass, and I kind of like this solid yellow here, so we'll just apply that to the bottle. As far as the cap, I'm going to type in brushed and see what comes up here. And I think I found one earlier that I liked, this anodized titanium brushed here. And so we're going to put that on the cap. And I know what that looks like because I do home brew, and that's the color of all the bottle caps that I get. So it looks pretty close to being what I would create here at home. Now, I have to assign a material to the beer itself. Now, there is a beer material here, but I can't drag it and drop it onto the product here because it's going to hit that glass first. So I have two choices. I can either drag and drop over here into my scene, or I can hide the bottle, and there we can see that fill on the inside. And in this case, I'm just going to type in beer, and there we have that liquid beer, and it's, you know, kind of transparent, and it's got some bubbles in it. All right. So now we'll go ahead and bring that bottle back, and because the bottle's made of glass, we can see through it. We can see the bubbles in the beer. We can kind of see the color of the beer behind the glass, and it's looking pretty good so far. I don't necessarily like the color of that bottle, so even though I applied a material to the bottle, I can come back later and add a color to that. So I can pick from my library of colors here, or I can just scroll down in my color palette and find something that I like. And I'm going to use this yellow orchid here. And you can see as I drag it, I don't have to drop it, but I can actually see what's happening before I let go. So if that's more what I want as far as the color of the bottle, I'll go ahead and assign that. Now keep in mind that the materials from the library are just colors and textures. when I change the color, as I did here, I'm not changing the material for that glass in my library. I'm basically changing the color of the material in my scene. So I'm not messing with my library at all. Now, I can create my own material libraries. If I do something that I like and I want to save that for later, I can do that. Okay. Now, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and make my camera. As I mentioned before, I like to create this one camera that I call home. That way I can always go back. And then we'll go back to the free camera here. And I'm just going to kind of zoom in a little bit just to kind of take a look at that. A little bit closer here. We'll rotate this over and take a look at the cap. All right, bring that a little bit closer. Now keep in mind, again, I'm just changing that camera, right? If I want to get back, I'll just double click on home, and then I'll double click on free again. I'm not changing home here. Now, I like my beer ice cold, right? Just like it came out of a cooler full of ice. So with that, I need to make it look like it came out of a cooler full of ice. So with that, I'm going to add a texture. Now, I want the texture of water droplets, condensation on this beer. I don't necessarily have anything in my library that looks like condensation. So I'm going to go ahead and create some. So I will create a folder to import this, and I'll just call it, we'll just call it beer, all right? Beer bottle. And we'll say okay. And what I did was I went out onto the internet and I downloaded some images of condensation, right? So if I go to my textures here, I have all these different images that I had downloaded off the internet, right? So I'll just go ahead and bring them in here to apply to this product. Now with this, the one I liked the best, I think, was this condensation 8, although I could use any one of these. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag this onto the glass. And even though that condensation is blue, it in the picture, the image, it neutralizes that when I put on the bottle. In this case, we're just going to make it be a bump, all right? And so that adds that texture to the bottle. So it looks like it came right out of a cooler full of ice. Now, I also want to put a label on this. So I'm going to bring in a label to this. And since I create home brew, I created a beer label in Photoshop, and I'm just going to go ahead and use the Photoshop format file, bring that in, and I'm going to drop that onto my product as well. But in this case, I don't want to add it to the glass. I want to add it to the product as a label, right? And then it comes in at a particular size. We'll go ahead and resize that later, but it does wrap it around the bottle. So we'll go ahead and accept that. Okay. Now, with that, we're going to now go over to our scene. Now that we've got the product all set up, in my scene, I'm going to modify these materials. And the one I'm going to modify is the glass that I applied to the bottle, because it's got the texture on it, it's got the label. So the first thing we'll do is we'll double click on that to modify that. And I'm going to go ahead and take that label to start with, and I'm going to resize it. Now I can use the DPI for sizing it, dots per inch, or I can specify explicitly what I want the width and the height, and I can even link those two together so that the aspect ratio is kept. But in this case, I'm going to specify that I want the width to be 2 1/8, and I want the height to be 3.5. All right, and with that, it's sitting right where I want. I'm going to go ahead and move that now. All right, so I'm just going to translate that down slightly, put it right on the bottle where I want it. and then we'll leave it there. We'll say okay. All right. Now, the one thing you'll notice with this is that since I brought that label in and put it on top of the bottle, it doesn't have any condensation on it, right? So if we were to zoom in on that, you'll see that that label doesn't necessarily have any condensation. So we can simply add that to the label as a texture, right? So I'm just going to take that condensation and I'm going to drag it over here so that it gets added to my label. And now, I mean, it's kind of hard to see until it gets fully rendered, but I've added that condensation as a bump to that label. Okay. The next thing I want to do is go to my textures here, and these little water droplets are a little bit large, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of scale that down a little bit. So we're just going to drag that down to right about there, and that looks a little bit more realistic, and I kind of like what I'm seeing there. So let's go to my camera, and we're going to go back home here, and then make sure I double click on free so if I make any changes. All right, so now I've got my product set up the way I want it. It's time to, create the environment. Now, in this case, my environment, I'm just going to use the studio lighting for this, and we'll just add that to here. So I have some kind of lighting, and then we're going to go ahead and to my backdrop. So I'm going to import another backdrop, and this one I took a photograph of my kitchen, right? So I'm just using my own my own house here for these images, and there's a photo of my kitchen. All right. So what I want to do now is I'm going to create the camera that I'm going to use for my rendering. I'm going to put the bottle on the counter, and then make sure my lighting looks good and my reflections and my shadows, and then create my rendering. So in this case, we'll go ahead and create a new camera. So we're going to add a camera here. In this case, we'll call it counter top, and make sure that's the active one. And then we're just going to kind of zoom out, put that bottle, kind of size it where it needs to be, right about, I think if I want to be like 80 inches away, maybe something like that, maybe a little bit further. And again, I'm just kind of eyeballing this. If I knew the exact measurement from where I'm standing from my counter, I could enter that explicitly. All right, we'll go ahead and put that bottle on the counter, something like that. I think I'm a little bit too big still, so we'll zoom out just slightly there, and then we'll pan that and put it in. Now again, my perspective's a little bit off on this, so we'll go ahead and match that perspective, and we're just going to drag these around until my perspective lines up kind of how I want it. And we're just using the geometry from the photograph to make this happen. And it doesn't really matter how long these are, other than that kind of gives you a little bit of a tolerance, if you will, for the longer the lines, easier it is to dial it in. But as far as the actual length, has no bearing on the perspective image. Now, if you don't necessarily have geometry that you can use, you can certainly fake it. But that looks pretty good. I'll accept that. And then I want to kind of zoom out just a little bit. I think my bottle's still a little bit too large. Something more like that. And then it's time to start, kind of adjusting my environment a little bit. So we'll go to my environment here, and I want to make sure that my light is kind of coming from this window over here. So if I go to my lighting environment, I'm just going to rotate this around until that light is kind of over where the window is. All right, so that looks like it's sitting on the counter. And then we can kind of scale that if we want. Maybe it's a little bit too close. Something. I think that's probably about right. And then go back to the backplate image and see, yeah, so now my lighting highlights are kind of in the same place as everything else. Okay, so we'll go to the ground, and with the ground, we want to add the reflection so that we can see that beer bottle in the counter. We got shadows on there, so everything kind of looks good. The shadows are in the right place for this image. So I think I'm in pretty good shape. There's one exception though, is I'm married. So if I have a beer, my wife's going to want to have a beer. So if I go back to my scene here, I can actually take that beverage product and I can copy it and we can paste it. All right. And when I paste it, we now have two of these, and I can take one and move it independently of the other. Bring it that way. That way. Something like that. And then we'll go ahead and take that cap and we'll crack that open. So we'll go ahead and move the cap independently, and we'll just bring that off some distance there and set it on the ground. All right, there's one beverage ready to enjoy. So at this point, I think I've got everything set up the way I want to create this rendering. Again, if I want, I can come in here and change any of the lighting aspects or change any of the image aspects. Again, maybe the vignetting to kind of diffuse that a little bit. Maybe change the bloom on there. Good enough. Okay, let's go ahead and create a rendering. Again, I'm just going to use the default. I don't want it to take too long, so we'll just use the default settings. If I wanted to, I can change the resolution. I have some presets down here if I wanted to change as well, or dial it in specifically. I can even render part of the image if I wanted to, but in this case, we'll just go ahead and render the whole thing. And we'll say okay, and we'll just check this out in our renderings folder, and there's the final product. Let's zoom in a little bit and see those bottles. And my image is a little bit blurred. I think if I would have changed the settings to increase the quality, we'd have a little bit better picture here. But again, I just want to do this quick and easy to show you how easy this tool is. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions if anybody has any questions. How quick to go to VR? Is that virtual reality? You know, that takes a little bit more effort, but it's still pretty quick. And again, it depends on how much quality you put into that, and how many objects are in your product. You have to think it has to render each of those models. So it all depends on how detailed your product is, how many surfaces basically in the models, and then what types of materials or colors or textures. So that's going to vary. It's kind of hard to say, but for something like this would be pretty quick. Other questions? Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So with that, then let's take to the last slide that I wanted to share with you. For more information, you can access the KeyShot website, www.keyshot.com. There is a YouTube channel for tips and tricks and webinars, and a lot of users post stuff up on here. Really great resource for learning the tool. There's a user manual that you can access that has all the information that you need to know about the tool, how to export to virtual reality, those kinds of things. And of course, if you have any questions of the TriStar team, our website, www.tristar.com, and our phone number here, 800-800-1714. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions. I'd be happy to answer. If you're interested in a more in-depth demonstration, or maybe even using your product, I'd be happy to put together a demonstration of your product. I would just need to have either the direct format CAD file or even a neutral file. If you export to a step, I can import the step file into KeyShot, and we can create a rendering with that. So thank you again for your attendance today. Look forward to working with you in the future and helping out in any way I can. With that, I'll turn it back over to Alex.
All right, thanks, Shawn. We did actually have one other question. I'm not sure if you have time to demonstrate it, but it was just the label that appears in the bottle also appears on the back side. The question was, can you sort of independently disable them? So disable the one on the back or vice versa?
Right, you can have it just hit the front or hit both sides. So it's just a toggle on the label, right?
Perfect. All right, I think that's going to do it. As Shawn said, feel free to just contact us if you have any other questions, or visit tristar.com. But thank you everyone for attending, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks again. Thank you, Alex.